Om Mana Nabudhi Shariram Indriyam Tanmatram Bhutani Bhutapanchakam. Aham Kritaschapi Vyatsvarupakam Tam Isham Atmanam Upuiti Shashvatam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one attains to the supreme Brahman, who dissolves mind, intellect, the gross and subtle senses, the gross and subtle elements, and the five sheaths, along with the ego, into Brahman, the indivisible ocean of consciousness. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Satyena, Om Satyena Labhyastapassa Hyesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotir Mayohi Shubraha Jampasanti Atayaha Kshinadoshaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self permeating all beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, by moderation, by austerities, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When the seer beholds the Atman, all of these have dissolved. To that one belongs peace, and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karva Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, indivisible reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And with those powerful chants from the Vedantic tradition, both ancient and contemporary, the contemporary being as recent as 700 AD, which is very current for India, because its teachings go back so far. So with those chants we initiate this third and final class on non-duality in Tibetan Buddhism and Vedanta. And we want to reiterate a theme I've been holding for the last two classes, and that's that non-duality requires practice, so that we want to defeat any notion in people's mind, especially contemporary Westerners who are still having to learn the Dharma, maybe evolve from the outer yoga to the inner yoga, if you might want to say it that way, and work on the purification of the mind. When a person reaches that apex or that juncture, then it's going to require not just a jump into some elevated position that you haven't prepared yourself for, but it's going to require that you understand Advaita the way it is, which will also require understanding the world the way it is. Krishna says that in the Gita, that the unreal never exists, the real never ceases to be. But the truth about both of those has been realized by the seers. So he's not just saying that the seers had this non-dual vision and all of a sudden just discarded the world. The world has a lot of karma, a lot of levels of consciousness, including your ancestors and the deities, that kings of heaven within you, if you want to put it that way. My father's mansion has many chambers, as it was been said before. So the world can come back on you in many ways. One of the ways is that you can take it back after you dissolve mind, intellect, the senses, the subtle senses, the elements, and the subtle elements, along with the ego, into Brahman, as I just chanted. Mano na buddhi, shariram, indriyam, tanmatram, bhutani na bhuta panchakam. Those are all those 24 cosmic principles that have been called forth by everyone from Lord Kapila in the ancient Sankhya tradition, through Krishna's time, and all the way to the present time in Shankara's case, when he brought them out with this chant itself. They dissolved all of those back into Brahman. And when they dissolve those into Brahman, then they become like the hailstone falling in the ocean. And that's an indescribable experience. Has to be experienced. It's the I and my father statement on it all, as far as India is concerned. So the point here being is that you're going to have to acclimatize yourself to higher levels of non-duality, not only just to understand what it entails to your own consciousness or in your own consciousness, but also to allow yourself time to settle into levels of higher consciousness. So we've been using that as a theme over the last 2 weeks. Main theme being non-duality in these two traditions. So we looked at points, precepts, practices in Tibetan Buddhism and finished that chart last week. And we also looked at Asparsha Yoga, Gaudapada's non-touch yoga. So we looked at the concomitants of both of those side by side, Tibetan Buddhism and Vedanta. And this is precisely why today I have side by side the Tibetan Buddhist teaching of Maha Mudra, the Great Seal, and this beautiful teaching on Ajati Vada, or the path of those who know that the soul is never born and the soul never dies. What's born and what dies is Mano, Buddhi, Shariram, Tanmatram, Indriyam, Bhutani, na Bhuta Panchakam. That's why you dissolve them back into the Brahman, because they're projections of your own mind. Those things are born and they die, but they also come back again. So you have these eternal cycles to everything. So a seeker of non-dual freedom might say, I think I want off the wheels of cycle, like getting off of merry-go-round, especially if you've eaten a lot of hot dogs and popcorn and you go around too much. You get a little dizzy and a little sick, so it's time to get off. So those cycles of rebirth are questioned by deeper thinkers who have had an inkling or an experience of non-duality. It doesn't come to you all at once in a wash unless you're readily prepared for that by the grace of God or Mother. And it more often comes to people in stages. These stages are called avastas. And the seers, the great souls like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, had a regiment of practices for you that were given by avastas. You saw where you were, what you were struggling with karmically and philosophically, and what were your good qualities were, and he would bring out those good qualities and have you place the prana in the mind's power, psychic prana, and everything at the disposal of them, so that these negative propensities or obstacles or impediments could be overcome in your mind. So in that case, the perspicacious student with lots of capacity wakes up, you see, and becomes fully focused and tries to awaken the third eye, which was there even evidently in Jesus' time. If thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. So the non-dual theme was there in all the traditions. India has just been masterful at realizing it and having many, many souls, not just one occasionally, but many, many souls striving after it and realizing it. And then they will come back and give us these kinds of teachings through the dharmic doorway. Dharma is very important. We have, although it's a bit questionable in today's societies, the way the world is right now, we have a moral background. And so that's not a moral background, moral background. If you put an A in front of it, it's going to be immoral in Sanskrit. So we have that moral background to us by which we can use as a springboard to get to dharmic teachings. And beyond virtue and vice, beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, and pride and shame, all these kinds of things are where these dharmic teachings are leading you and aiming at, to get rid of a lot of the conventional stuff that's in your mind. Just before, while I was driving here today and before we turned on the camera and welcomed our live stream audience from different points of the world, I was saying that there's ideas and there's ideals. So an ideal that you have is based in your mind, but an ideal is something that you hold in your heart. An ideal is there for all time. You're born with it. An idea occurs to you over time. So we've often put that in terms of, if you can bring the heart and the mind together, that's called Metta Kendra in Sanskrit, where you merge the heart and the mind together like two wings of a bird. And you have this intelligence that checks everything and inspects everything that you think, plus this heart that's wide open and universal and loving and compassionate, and then you've got the best combination. It would be like having Jnanam and Bhakti in the same set of tools, you see. Those two yogas particularly accented by the seers and the saints. The saints more focused on devotion, the seers more focused on non-dual truth. So if you have these kinds of combinations, these excellent hybrids, yogically speaking, then you'll be well equipped for approaching non-duality. And you'll recognize it when you see it. That's one of the great teachings in our tradition that Holy Mother Shisharda Devi, my teacher's teacher, used to talk about, is that grace of God is always there, but you won't recognize it unless you do practice. The mind happens to go into low cycles sometimes, and then to restless cycles sometimes, and then balance. So you can't keep that balance all the time, most people. Equanimity, and though that's what a good penultimate goal to strive for before non-duality is, to keep your mind balanced all the time and not fall out of yoga. It's yogic equipoise that they want. First they want you to get a hold of the prana, your energy, raise your energy up, and then hold a point when you reach it, and not fall down from there. So every time you fall down, you have to pick yourself up again and start over, and gets to be rather tiring and bothersome to do that. So you want to try and hold that point, and that point then would be this equanimity of mind, by which you'll be able to recognize the grace of God, if you want to put it that way in devotional terms, or that non-dual state that may come upon your mind without the slightest provocation other than your practice that you did in the past. So it's through practice that the fruits of spirituality get granted to you. A lot of people don't make that connection. In fact, at first you do spiritual practice and quite often negative things start happening to you right then. That's one of the 7 impediments in Kundalini Yoga. Is that the second one is that you start to do a practice after you get a guru, like a mantra or some exercises and so forth, and right away negativity start coming to you, and so people think that their practice was responsible for those negativities. Their practice was responsible for removing the veil that covered the fact that you had negativities in you in the first place. So then perseverance, as Holy Mother said, is going to be tantamount. You have to pierce through that karma revealing level and reach that equanimity, and so the non-dual teachings will then make more sense to you. Like Avatut sings, I found when I inspected myself that I never had a mind that did any thought, that did any thinking, nor did I have a body that acted, that created any karma. Those things were never mine. So he's talking from the standpoint of his realized self, which is bodiless and beyond thought. It's not thought, energy, or matter. It's eternal verity. It's that wide open heart we were just talking about, blended with this very refined and refined intellect. See, if you take up energy in Kundalini Yoga system, it's sublimated. So your intelligence gets refined and sublimated. So that's what the teachers are looking for in people. So if you come and ask them, I want to study Kundalini Yoga, the first thing they'll say is, have you unfurled your sail yet? You see, have you unfurled your sail, or have you untightened your coil? See, so it's like a coil, a spring, like a shock absorber or something. You just compress it down into it. So it's got a lot of power there at the base of your spine. So they want to know if you've started the worship and the study yet that's begin to uncoil that spring. And in that case, then they say, well, good, then we'll give you some practice to do that further, because the more of those coils of that spring that you uncoil, the more your true nature is going to shine through to you, because it had been veiled by the coiling, the condensing, the impediment of having not awakened yet spiritually. So all of that as a sort of preamble to the fact that when we talk about non-duality, we're talking about such high-minded teachings as Maha Mudra and also Ajativada. We know that was used far back in the time of Lord Vashishta, and he was teaching the young teenage Ram, and Ram was the avatar before Krishna. So we know that even long before Krishna's time, Ajativada, or non-duality, was being taught, as much as it could be taught, you might say transmitted. You were doing practices that would awaken this non-dual awareness in you. In a sense, the two weren't even connected. One was just a truth, and one was a practice you did in order for the mind to unveil itself so it could realize the truth. So it wasn't like you were gaining enlightenment. Enlightenment is always yours. You had just fallen out of memory of it, forgotten it. And so you had to do some practices that then stripped the veils away so that you could just see the truth as it is. We just chanted that. Om Satyena Labhyastapasa Hyesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharena Nityam. So this eternal truth, when you practice moderation and austerities and veracity and so forth, then that mind becomes pure. And when the mind becomes pure, then it sees the Atman. So it was these practices you did that unveiled the always already present, always pervasive Atman in you, and it was your mind that you were working with. So Buddhism is really so much about mind. And many people have, I think it was Guru Rinpoche and other great teachers in Tibetan Buddhism have said that the mind is talked about so much, and it's admired so much, and it's also guarded against so much, because it can go either way on you. Sri Ramakrishna said, it's the doorway to hell, it's also the gateway to liberation. That's how he described mind. So when you talk about the mind, you have to realize that when people realize what's in the mind-only schools, like this, how many seeds are in the pumpkin, and which way you can go with it, You could either take the seeds and burn them and not have form anymore, not turn into a pumpkin head, or you could water all of them and have a patch of pumpkins. That's a host of lifetimes. And so when people realize the mind-only schools and the implications of the mind-only schools, those people usually aren't talking about God at all. They're not talking about Brahman at all. They're not talking about non-duality at all. They're just speaking in terms of the mind being the one reality. It's either pure and it's impure. In the Amrita Bindu Upanishad we're studying in San Francisco recently, the first sloka is, mind is of two kinds, pure and impure. So it wasn't just Buddhism that talked about emptiness and freeing the mind of thoughts. Buddhism was just one of the great darshanas of India, or is one of the great darshanas of India, and it's had its trek around the world, all the way to Japan in recent times, and come back full circle. So 64 generations it took to do that. And then 24 generations before Buddha was Jainism, the non-violent religion going way back before Lord Buddha was in the body, and Vishishta prior to that, and so forth. So you have this long history of Mother India courting this Dharma and using it to awaken the mind so that it can realize its true nature, the emptiness, and the combined emptiness and radiance of Maha Mudra. When they looked at the mind like that, and they saw pure mind as opposed to impure mind, they saw that everything had come out of the mind. And if the mind sees that everything has come out of it, and it's in a pure condition, then everything came out of it was also pure. So all is Brahman is the result of that. You can certainly not say all is Brahman if the world is a pile of problems to you. If your mind is a mass of confusion, then it doesn't make sense. You're really going against the precepts of great principles like Ajativada. The Ajativada, on the other hand, from Maha Mudra is no birth. There's no jati. So I was never born, I never die. I could sing you slokas about it. Namrichor Nashanka Name Jati Beda. I never had a death because I was never born, and I never had a father and mother because I am unborn. But on the side of India, you have this twin concomitant called a parinama that helps you double-check the whole equation of non-duality. That is, the mind isn't quite philosophically decided. It hasn't made a siddhanta yet, a conclusion about everything. For instance, like, say, everything's empty, or on this side, Brahman is the only existence, the world is unreal. If you haven't made one of those siddhantas in your mind philosophically, and decidedly done so that you could renounce one and accept the other, I mean, it's no different in Christianity. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here. Christ meant here on earth is not man's home. And if you make it your home, then you're just acting like animals. You don't know you have any higher destiny. You don't know that there's such a thing as the Atman within you. You don't know that you can go and sit on the left-hand side of or right-hand side of your Father in heaven, as it were, and realize your true nature. There's no higher goal for you then. So if you've made that consummate conclusion about everything, then that qualifies you for accepting the fact that you're a birthless, deathless soul. And death will then mean nothing to you. I have received a command from my Divine Mother that death must die. Well, that's how India describes that. I've received a command from my Divine Mother that death must die, because Yama, the Lord of Death, is just one of the little powers under Divine Mother's hand. See? She causes it to work. She causes it to function, death, so-called death. And, of course, death does not register in the realm of the Atman. It's birthless and deathless. So there's a double check I was just saying to this. If you can't quite make a conclusion around Ajativada and you're a little unsure, then they say, well, how about we introduce you to this second principle called a parinama. Because everyone's talking about parinama, Gaudapada says in his Karika. Everyone thinks that change is true. So it's one of the problems with saying, oh, the world is constantly changing. That's a halfway to a siddhanta. Oh, I finally realized that everything's changing. You see, but that can leave you in a lurch really badly, because then if you don't know reality and you think the world was real, then reality changes. And that's not what the seers have said about it. It's immutable, it's unchanging. So then you've got a halfway conclusion that's heading you in the wrong direction. So a parinama comes by. It's not all parinama. Everything out here is parinama. What? Mano, Nabudhi, Sarira, Indriyam, Bhutani, Nabhutapanchakam, Tanmatram. All those things are changing in cycles constantly. But there's one unchanging substratum upon which all this change takes place, like a stage for a dancer. And so they say, well, then how about considering a parinama? You see, Swamiji, when he came here, everyone was about creation, God created. He said, well, that's just alien to my culture. We don't think that way. We think God, what you call God, we call Brahman, we call it a-create. It doesn't create at all. And it doesn't sustain, and it doesn't destroy. It's unborn, and it's undying, so it stays in one place, all-pervasive, pure and perfect. You should leave it there. He said there are two tendencies of the human soul. One's to try and pull Brahman down to the earth, and the other is to try and raise yourself up to Brahman. That would be inward to Brahman. He said, unfortunately, most people take the first route. They try and pull Brahman down to earth. So now all of a sudden, kids become God, and nature becomes God, and angels become God, and everything becomes God when it's not God at all, because God is formless. So you've transgressed the law. You're calling God a form. But God will never be caught in a form. Not this non-dual reality. It's formless. So one of the double checks then is a parinama. You say, well, it means everything outside is changing, and so I saw that much. But then I didn't realize that the substratum underneath it was unchanging, aparinama. Really, the best word to use is transformation, because everyone believes in transformation. I was born, I grew, I contracted disease, I got old, I decayed, and I died. That's all transformation. If you believe in that, then you believe in parinama. But if you believe the soul was sitting by, or standing by, watching all of that, and that it was unaffected by it, then you're a candidate for aparinama, and therefore a candidate for non-duality. And now you can base your stance in non-duality. Ajativada, I was never born and never die. Aparinama, there is no transformation going on. So essentially what you're saying is transformation is a lie. It's a wool pulled over your eyes. It's an apparency. It's non-actual. There's just not many words you can find in English to describe it. It's something that seems to be happening, but it isn't. That's transformation. So you're never born, you never grow, you never die, you never get decay, you never get disease. And neither does anything go through any change that's real. Anytime you see change, then you back off from it and you take up this position of non-duality. Now in Maha Mudra, that's called the Great Seal. Everything is stamped with the seal of being empty and radiant. It's empty, it's also, that emptiness, if you study it, is full of luminosity. So you can see that Tibet had a very good relationship with India and understood the non-duality as its underlying tenet ever since it gave up Bandhaban religion and took on India at the time of 700 AD. So then it started studying rebirth, started studying phases of time called bardos, and started studying how the soul shifts. And then it understood that this shifting was all non-actual. It was an apparent movement that was going on, parinama. And so in that way, you had a sort of early relationship with Tibetan Buddhism that Tibetan Buddhism had with India that was very accurate, and so that it could begin to mature to such a place where it wouldn't just find the world empty, because that gave the Mayavadins and some of the Buddhists a real problem. Buddhism fell, and a couple of the forms of Buddhism fell out of Dharma and truth because it concluded everything was empty. But Tibetan Buddhism comes along and says it's empty, but that emptiness is to be meditated on it. And when you meditate upon that emptiness, you'll find out that it's luminous. You see what the beauty of it is that if the mind projected everything in the mind-only schools, that the projections themselves were empty. See, they didn't have any substance, but they were formed on a foundation of radiance and luminosity. Thought was radiant and beautiful. And you wouldn't have any problem understanding that if you saw the kingdoms of heaven within you, the higher kingdoms of heaven, say the realm of the Trinity. You'd say that's a very, very sublime, ecstatic, beautiful place to be, with great souls watching over it, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And at that point, if you had had darshan with such deities, then you could easily say, I see, this is a very wonderful projection. It's a projection nonetheless, but it's a very wonderful one. But other realms aren't so fortunate. The realm of the ancestors, the realm of the celestials, the realm of the human beings are subject to suffering because they don't understand that they're unborn and undying and there is no change going on that's real. So you come to some conclusion in Tibetan Buddhism about that. And over here it would be called a Jativada, and you double check it with aparinama. There's no transformation possible in Brahman. It just doesn't happen. Transformation only happens where there's name, form, time, space, and karma. Those five are called Maya in my tradition. That's the definition for Maya that Swami Vivekananda brought to us. People were actually calling Maya empty and illusory. He said, no, it's not like that. You're only getting half the picture here. Actually, Maya is name, form, time, space, and causality. And those things cause people to believe in the unreal. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, enough lifetimes lived in the realm of Maya, name, form, time, space, and causality, cause the soul to think that the world is real. So he's saying, but it's not real. It's your mind concentrating on name, form, time, space, and causality that has caused you to believe that it's real. The seers never fall into that problem. The minute they see the world, they say, up, changing, up. You see birth, death. Oh, I see, that's the realm of change. I don't buy it. And so they always remain close to their true nature, even when they're in the body. So it's a good point of debate, if you will. Does the Jeevan Mukta suffer ignorance? Because the Jeevan Mukta, the living liberated soul, took on the body, and took on a mind, and took on the five senses, and took on the world of objects. So does he suffer from ignorance on account of that, or is he or she different than all these other beings who are not Jeevan Muktas? So there must be a distinction in the living liberated soul that makes us worship such a being, that ideal we hold in our heart. So I hope I've given that some sort of an introduction for you to warm you up philosophically to and bring you back to where we were when we left off last class. So here then we have Maha Mudra. So at the end of last class we finished Asparsha Yoga. You saw that beautiful image of Shiva and Vishnu, half Shiva, half Vishnu, half swan, and the two vehicles and so forth that support them, half Garuda. And we remember those points about Asparsha Yoga. They're probably in your notes because that's a beautiful system, Gaudapada. And remember the word that, if you remember the word in English that he uses that really galvanizes our thinking process, about what non-duality is non-origination. It's famous in the world of philosophy. Even the Western philosophers have looked at Gaudapada's Eastern system and gone, that's marvelous. I don't know if I believe it yet, but that's marvelous. See, because philosophers sometimes they have to argue for a while, and philosophers often don't practice. See, but Gaudapada and others are beings that actually had the philosophy and then practiced it. What a novel idea, as they say, you see, that one should do both. So in that case then, if a philosopher that knows his snuff comes upon a system like Gaudapada's Karika, which is his commentation on the Mandukya Upanishad, which is just 12 slokas long, all about the word. And remember, that was, very ancient in India to be speaking about the word, like Jesus was speaking about it. In the beginning was the word, it was with God, and it was God. So in that way, you're thinking about it and speaking about it all these many millennia, then it becomes something that you can comment on very lucidly when the time comes. And so then you lend your mind to it, and even contemporary people then say, that's marvelous. What's the word he used again? Non-origination. Let's all memorize that word in English. It means there is no origin to anything. You see how, so no origin to the soul, because why? Because it doesn't get born and it doesn't die. So it's unoriginated. And nature too, come to find out, it's also without beginning, middle, and end. Don't fall into the trap of physics only and material and evolution. But if you believe in dualities, which is a good and a bad thing, depending on how you take it, if there's an evolution, there has to be an involution. If there's an evolution, it had to have come from something involved, and then it came out and evolved. And these are the premises of accurate Advaita, like the Advaita of Madhva and Ramanuja, based upon the fact that there are these realities called God and mankind, and or if you want to say mankind and nature, and one came out of the other. One worships the other. One's sentient, one's insentient. Mankind is sentient, that is the consciousness, and nature is insentient. So these are certain things that you have thought out as you went through this philosophical rendering in your mind, come to conclusions about, therefore qualified yourself to understand these great truths. So everything is unoriginated, is how Ajati, is how Gaudapada put it to us. No beginning, middle, and end. Who does it sound like? Sri Krishna in the Gita. I have my external nature, called the five elements in mind. I have my internal nature, called unmanifested nature, Prakriti. Then I have my supreme being. See, so I have three bodies, I have three forms. And he said, only my supreme being, my supreme nature is changeless. See, the rest go through cycles and so forth. And as far as Sri Krishna is concerned, he's seeing it from the standpoint of Jnana Chakshu. Christ said, if thine eye be single, but thousands of years prior to Jesus, Christ said, Jnana Chakshu, you must awaken this, open this third eye. Jnana, wisdom, Chakshu, eye. So it's the wisdom eye. If it's become closed, then not only will you not know the Dharma, but you won't know these beautiful systems of non-duality that have come out of India, because you haven't qualified yourself in the Dharma. So again, you can't just jump to some high position and say, oh, I'm going to champion that. That's my position. That's an ideal in your mind, but the idea in your mind, but the ideal that's in your heart is going to have to be realized You have to open this chakra before you open this chakra. It's ascending. See? So the heart has to open, and what's the main thing that has to happen in the heart? Thou shalt love thy Lord, God, with all your heart, then with all your mind, and your neighbors, yourself, and so forth. There's a sequence to these chakras, to these openings. Well, people can open the heart, and still it'll be the heart of the ego. Oh, I'm emotional, I'm sentimental, I love this and that form. See, but I never loved God. I just said I did, or maybe I forgot about God. So basically, what most people are calling God is the ego. They're worshiping their egos. Well, we know that's true about power-hungry people, and people who dominate and cause suffering and so forth. That's all obvious ego, machinations of the ego. But even when it gets to heaven, you see, a heaven-seeking soul, as Svetasvatara Upanishad says, those beings are going to heaven and they're coming back to earth. That sounds like change to me. That sounds like movement to me. And there is no change or movement in the Atman. So, who has realized the Atman? Those who have peace and none else. To them belong peace and to none else, or the everlasting peace that passes all understanding. So in that way you make sense out of the philosophy and you adhere to it. See? And you don't give it up until such a time as when then the heart moves to a higher place. It's, what was the word again? It loves God first and foremost. When it has that in its favor, then these higher teachings will make sense to it. And finally, the door of non-duality will open. And it's beyond form when that happens. Sorry, it's beyond Jesus. Sorry, it's beyond Krishna. Sorry, it's beyond any ideal that has a form. So you get to the Father through the Son is how you would say that in Christendom. So you have to have that non-dual experience to consummate the whole thing. That would be this chakra. See, call it 1,000-petaled. So having to refer to Kundalini Shakti a lot in this non-dual reckoning, because Sri Ramakrishna said, without the awakening of Kundalini, there can be no spiritual progress for mankind. She has to come on the scene. She has to be awakened. You have to uncoil, see, that spring of Kundalini power, so she herself will take over. That's called egolessness. Have a problem worshiping the ego, whether you know it or not, call her into the battlefield. Let her sever your head. You see the pictures of Kali? She's got that non-dual sword of wisdom, and she's holding a severed head. So you want quick, sure relief from suffering and egotism? Try offering yourself to Mother Kali, like Sri Ramakrishna did. And in one lifetime, be done with all of this nonsense about change and these ideas about birth and death. Now, if you look at it from the standpoint of Maha Mudra, which we'll take up first, so we took Asparsha Yoga last time at the end of the class, let's shift back from Advaita Vedanta to Tibetan Buddhism. I told you at the beginning of the first class that I feel especially qualified to speak on both these subjects because I've taken initiation into both of them. Karmapa gave me mantra of green and white Tara, along with Lexixon, our founder, in the 70s, and then I got my initiation by Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, into Vedanta, also early 70s. So then I've had plenty of time to both study and practice both of these, and they can go side by side because they're both India, basically. Tibetan Buddhism has that flavor of Tibetan Buddhism, so let's look at that flavor that Marpa found out about and came back over the Himalayas and gave to Milarepa, basically the beginning of Indian Buddhism and mixed with yoga into the country of Tibet in about 700 AD. So the flavor of Tibetan Buddhism we looked at last time, remember some of the points? You had to have an invocation. So you had to have some sort of empowerment, was the very first point. So you go see a guru. The empowerment can happen consciously by the two coming together, or the empowerment can happen just by you being in the presence of Holy Company and getting inspired. Really, this latter one is what happens to most people. Most Westerners are arrogant, so they're not going to want to hear anything about God or spirituality. They think they know everything, but they're still babies, as Vivekananda said when he came here. So it's going to be very hard for them to approach the guru and get teachings and so forth and get some help from Holy Company. But that's everything in both these traditions is about Holy Company to begin with. So once they do get that empowerment, then they can go on and they can start worshipping Vajravahini, the mother. Right there you've got your connection from Guru, who is a child of the mother, into the Divine Mother herself. So there's another point there. And then further on you get these other three concomitants of the points and practices, which we started with last week, and we finished out that chart. And a lot of that had to do with what leads up to Maha Mudra. The very last point on that chart, if you remember, was when you get these certain practices under your belt and you make some headway, then you're qualified for Maha Mudra. So Tibetan Buddhism set it up very nicely. Look at your notes, look back on the live streaming recording, and see how everything came to Maha Mudra for them. So Maha Mudra, the Great Seal, everything is stamped with combined emptiness and luminosity. And that's how they describe it. Here is how it was put in the tradition. The Maha Mudra teaching was revealed to the Mahasiddha Tilopa by the Venerable Bodhisattva Samantrabhadra, and was then transmitted to Naropa. Naropa transmitted it to Marpa. Marpa gave it to Milarepa, and in sacred lineage succession it reached Tibet. So both Tilopa and Naropa were Indian Buddhists, yogis. Marpa went across the border, got the teaching from them, took it back to Tibet, and gave it to his first student, Milarepa. And that's a general history of how it moved from that country. It's a matter of opinion, whether it moved to China first before Tibet, but it was probably about the same time. And China was under the influence of Confucianism, and Tibet was under the influence of Bon religion. Both these pretty much got absorbed into Buddhism, and Buddhism began to be on the foreground of everything. Everyone was thinking in terms of this Indian system called Buddhism. And so it spread by mendicants walking across all these countries. And it's the most marvelous spread of religion we ever saw, because it never raised a finger, not to speak of a sword, against anyone. It was all a non-violent move of Buddhism to these different countries. And we know then it went to other countries, like today we have Vietnam, you see, Thich Nhat Hanh, or we have Zen Buddhism, the Roshis that have come. That was 64 generations later. Buddhism making its way through the whole world and coming back and clasping hands in one big beautiful cycle of a spread of a totally non-violent religion that focused on, along the way, on emptiness. It brought your mind to the fact that everything was happening because of your mind, and you'd have to purify your mind, and then nothing would happen anymore. You're getting to a place of emptiness, and it was a stage you went through. So all of practitioners of Dharma think this teaching is a priceless gem. So in the field of religion, whether you call it Indian, Tibetan, or Chinese, or Vietnamese, or Japanese, this Maha Mudra has distinguished itself in the same way that Gaudapada's non-origination, or Jativada, has distinguished itself as defining non-duality, as well as words can say. So let's see what words can say. Here you see Maha Mudra has 3 aspects. And you're supposed to hear them and then put them all into one. So the first aspect is all manifestation, we call it the view. So first is the view, then there's the practice, and then there's the path of action. So you got to have the view first before you get into action. It's a very interesting order. It would be nice if we all thought about our day before we went out and plunged into it. We'd probably do things better and would be much more prepared for things that happen not according to our intentions. So it's sort of like visualizing first and preparing first. So the view is very important. In the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, one of the very first things that has to happen is samyak darshana. You have to have right thinking, right perspective, right intelligence. So all of these things you try and generate first before you say go into the practice or into action. So with that said, let's see what the view is. Very important, I think most important of all here, of all 3 of these, I believe, is the view. All manifestation and the universe is contained in the mind. And the true nature of mind is the realm of illumination, shining with radiance that can neither be conceived or touched. These are the key points of the view. Short, simple, sweet indeed. You could almost stop after the first sentence. All manifestation in the universe is contained in the mind. Though mind-only schools, again, we'll look maybe at the pumpkin chart there, because we have a lot of seeds in us that have a lot of worlds in them. The seeds for everything come from the mind. So right away you're at variance, or separating yourself away from the creation theory, 7-day creation theory. You're also looking at science now with its evolution theory askance. I have another way now to look at all of this, that all of this came out of the mind. What, me? My little old mind? Not quite. But you do have your own world, don't you? You do have your own perspective, you do have your own ideations, you do have your own conceptualizations, you do have your own thoughts, and they connect with others. So mind must be at least twofold, individual and collective. If you knew the collective, you know that it's not just connecting with other people on earth, but it's connecting with your ancestors. So that's where the collective mind starts to take on more of its meaning. And if you meditated on your ancestors, like they do, say, in Japan with Shintoism, which is another religion that, when Zen Buddhism came along from its long march of India, took Shintoism and absorbed some of it. And Shintoism was pretty much a lot about worshiping your ancestors. Well, India had that same ideal for a while, and it was a problem, too. Buddha came actually to get you free of your ancestors. So you must get beyond time and space and rebirth with your ancestors. Who am I being reborn from, if I'm being reborn? Who else? Your fathers, your mothers, who last lifetime were your children and grandfathers. So there's a continual march of souls who are doing a transmigration that is not to be believed, because there is no transformation in reality. So mind at the individual and collective level is falling victim to the projection process and believing in it. It believes in worlds, it believes in ancestors, it believes in gods and goddesses. Well, Tibetan Buddhists did too, and it had you first concentrate on ideals. But where did it tell you they existed? Up in the sky? In your own mind is where you find them. So that would be more like gathering your powers. You can't really make any inward progress if you don't pay the guardians at the gate. This is a Tibetan Buddhist expression. Guardians at the gate. See, so these gates are 7 chakras. At each chakra, there's a guardian at the gate that will either let you pass or not. And so you have to have something to give them. So, say if you have a mantra, they value that. See, what's your mantra? Oh, okay, you can pass, you see. And then you use that mantra at a higher level. What's your mantra? I'm sorry, that mantra won't let you into this level. See, you haven't understood non-duality yet. So you're paying the guardians at the gate as a way of speaking. So in that way, then, this march of souls along a path that is all nonsense, Vivekananda says, the path of coming and going, is the rebirth process in samsara that you've been hearing about, is the existence in Maya that you've been hearing about. Samsara, Maya. See? So they have words for it in their traditions, grounds of birth and death and ignorance. The ignorance of what? Your true nature, but ignorance of everything being contained in your mind, or birth and death being a lie. You see, basically a big fib to yourself. I think I'll be born. Oh, now I'm dying. It was never true. So then one begins to question the wombs out of which one came. See? Krishna says in the Gita, there are many wombs to be born in, Arjuna. Some of them lower, some of them higher. You should be very careful about this process, which wombs you take to be born in. And I won't use the old joke of a womb with a view. Oh, I did, sorry. So a view would be, of course, a view like this, isn't it? Shall I say it again? All manifestation, that is, everything, is in the mind. Your mind has produced it, which means God has not. Right away you're stepping away from the 7-day creation theory, and you're stepping away from any form of linear view of time, or intellectual frame of reference, my teacher used to say. You're stepping away from it. I don't entertain that anymore. Actually, they've told me I'm birthless and deathless, and if I do engage in birth and death, it's all in here. Basically, that's about as simple as you can put it. So all transformation takes place in the mind. All manifestation takes place in the mind. The whole universe is in the mind. All worlds are in the mind. Now put this on. Put your thinking cap on, or your non-thinking cap, as our founder Lexington used to say, and non-think about it. Or unthink it. It's a cocoon that you've wrapped yourself in philosophically. Now you have to unwind it and emerge. Free, as you always are, as your soul always was. Now soul with a capital S and soul with a small s is a good teaching. The small s soul is the mind. It transmigrates. The transmigration is all a dream. It doesn't really happen. Gaudapada says it's like a runner running a race in a dream. He gets water, drinks it, people help him, cheer him along. He gets a trophy. He wakes up and he doesn't have the trophy, and he's not left 1 inch from his bed. So it was all in a dream that he ran this race, and that's just a description of all of life and of all of lifetimes. There are dreams you're running in your head, in your mind. And that's how powerful the mind is. And you'll understand that if you have an individual mind yourself and you start connected with the collective mind. You'll understand it even deeper, and more importantly, if you connect those two with the cosmic mind. That's called Mahat. There's where you get the great souls. Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, there's where you get those great souls. Why we sing to them so much, and we haven't done it for a few weeks. So let's do it. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwara, Gurur Deva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Deva Maheshwara Gurur Eva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Tantvaititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvama Shadilaksham Ekam Nicham Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Sri Gunarahitam Sadgurum Tanamami. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So that's the Trinity. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva. So Guru Sakshi Param Brahma. My Guru is the eternal witness of all this phenomena. Guru Eva Param Brahma. It's the one principle that Sri Ramakrishna talked about. Your mind is your own Guru. But you must waken up to higher levels of your mind in order for that to be effective and true. So these beautiful stotrams, non-dual stotrams, exist. There are a lot of devotional songs in India and a lot of chants, kirtan and so forth. But these non-dual stotrams are special and extremely indicative of that one most enigmatic piece of non-dual information that you'll ever receive. That is epitomized so well by Maha Mudra. So I hope I've accented enough this first point about the view. So now that you know that, look in the mind and see if it's the doorway to hell or if it's the gateway to liberation. It's up to you to use it in either one of those ways, and you see people doing it all the time. If you're violent, ill-tempered, ill-mannered, deluded, pig-ignorant, the consciousness of a dead bush, see, then you're probably using that mind, that self-same mind that others use to get free. You're using it as a way of binding yourself. This is a simple way of explaining everything by leaving God out of the picture. You see, it's so refreshing, basically, that God now doesn't have any responsibility for us here. This is the realm of the mind. It's not the realm of Brahman. The realm of Brahman is where there's nameless, formless, spaceless, timeless. The closest thing you could say that comes to that is your deep sleep state tonight. That's where you went formless. And most people, even the evil, have recourse to deep sleep. And when the evil go into deep sleep, they bring out seeds from that state and water them in unholy ways. And when the illumined go into deep sleep, they bring out seeds of beneficence and right thinking, right perspective, and give those to people, water those. So it's an entirely different thing. It's back to a simple teaching. The mind is of two kinds. The Amrita Bindu Upanishad says, pure and impure. Chit Shuddhi or Chit Ashuddhi. So now knowing that about the mind, put it on and bring out the best. Let it lead you to the Dharma, and let the Dharma lead you to spiritual realization. Let's look then at the key points of the practice. Now, this is nice, isn't it? Because I've been accenting this, that non-duality has a practice. So here it is, you get the right perspective, but you still have to do practice. So, what about these errant thoughts? Errant thoughts are the antithesis of the view. So errant thoughts go against this grain. You don't have the right view if you bring God into it. Like God is a creator. When God never created anything, the mind did it. It's not a wise position to move to, and India never did. Even its dualistic schools never did. So, if God exists separate from humankind, then God is pure and perfect, and humankind isn't. That's as far as they would give you. But the truth is that those two are one. Mankind is God walking around on two legs. But if its mind is still pure, those two legs are taking him in all sorts of errant directions, you see, with errant thoughts. So that's the antithesis of the view. So awareness, the illumination, is always blissful there. Meditate in a manner of non-doing and non-effort. These are the key points of the practice. So if I put on this mind, and I start thinking, then a manner of non-doing. I must think that I'm doing nothing. So Sri Ramakrishna had that one very well down. We looked at him and talked to him, and he said, like my teacher used to say, all you Westerners go around and say, how do you do? And what am I supposed to do? I'm a non-dualist. Put up my hand, I have to say, I do nothing. So how do you do is not a consideration, you see. So Sri Ramakrishna had this non-doership, and it was based on non-ownership first, and non-agency second. You see, non-ownership means none of this is mine. You see, I saw that it was all in the mind, and I gave it up. So the mind doesn't trick me anymore. Non-agency means I'm not the agent of my actions. So therefore, I don't do anything. Now this is very easy to say and very difficult to actually epitomize. Because as long as the ego is there, you have to do. And that's true of everyone. How to do without doing is the whole thing. And Krishna actually says that in the Gita. Those who understand inaction in action and action in inaction, they truly see. Probably the hardest sloka to unwrap in the whole Bhagavad Gita. But it has to do with this non-agency, non-doership, and how the person is now saw it all in his or her mind, has given it up, made the right conclusion, therefore, as we were just talking about earlier, and sees it all as being empty, but also sees it all as being radiant. So we're getting to that. But you can see then how the higher thinker approaches these refined realms, like the poet Tu Fu sees it. Chinese poet says, oh, breathless air of heights. So when he got into this meditation, it was like going to this, hiking these beautiful trails on the top of the Tibetan mountains where you can hardly breathe. It was just a breathless almost experience. And everything is so cerebral and so ethereal and so uplifted. You're transported so deeply that now this emptiness looks radiant. See? Because there's nothing to see up there. There's just boundless sky and barely enough air to breathe, yet you're elated. Doesn't it sound a little bit like your deep sleep state? That is, if you were to recognize it tonight, or come out of it in the morning and practice it. Or what they want you to practice at 5 or 6 in the morning. Why? Because you just woke up out of dream and deep sleep. On the particular day that you practice meditation that you woke up out of dreaming, you won't probably get very much except a few signs. Oh, I remember that dream now. You can connect that one to the next one. Connect that one to the next one. Trace your dreams back to this border of dreamless sleep. But if you come straight out into the waking state, straight out of dream sleep, and you sit in meditation, you go right back into deep sleep. The difference is that you're aware of it. You didn't just fall into deep sleep out of nescience. You woke up and you came out of deep sleep, so you go straight back into it when you meditate. I had that happen to me yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday, when we meditated together. Sat down and I was right back into deep sleep again. And the whole thing was so high and I wasn't breathing. So this is a state that you practice getting into. Practice, you see. It's not something you can pretend or hope for even. It's something that you practice putting yourself into. You assume the position, you see. So these are the key points of the practice, he says, that awareness, illumination, is always blissful there. And what did he say just before that? All errant thoughts are liberated in the Dharmakaya, the field of teachings. Have you ever noticed that if you're into study, say, of the Dharma, whether it be Hindu or Buddhist or Jain or Sufi, you're into the practice, that as long as you're practicing, errant thoughts are out of the picture. See? That is, as long as you're concentrating, there's no karma, there's no problems anymore. As soon as you put the book down, go away, get back into your everyday life, go to work, here come this march of things back on you. And you have to consider them, fend yourself, be careful of how they enter, and try and discriminate between those that are beneficial and not beneficial. It's all a big bunch of work then, you see. Which is why he said, meditate in the manner of non-doing and non-effort. If you really, I'm going to get enlightenment, you see, it's probably not going to come to you, because that's not the way they're describing the mind. It's original radiance. It's natural. It's spontaneous light. You have to put yourself in that light to say, I am that. Oh, there it is, you see. Not something, it's outside of me, I've got to go get it somewhere, you see. Like taking a trip to the bathroom, you see, and putting a bunch of effort into the next movement. See? It's non-movement we're talking about. So the mind has excretions too. And those are these errant thoughts. So you should probably put them on hold, put them off, and get into a state of non-doing, non-ownership, non-agency, and non-self-effort, and just be who you are. This has always been the distinction that India's made between the two realms, being and becoming. Becoming is all one of these lies that you're telling yourself. I will grow. I will get enlightened. I will do this. I will do that. That's the ego, I. It's probably better than saying, I will not get enlightened. I will not grow. See? Which is one of these errant thoughts that occurs to your mind. But better than that is that I'm going to put the I that's saying this out of the picture, and I'm going to meditate in the atmosphere of non-doing and non-self-effort. I'm just going to sit and be Brahman. So that's why Shankara says in the Vivekachudamani, practice having samadhi. You probably never heard a seer say that before. Say, well, practice hard and you'll attain samadhi, but practice having samadhi, as if it's already yours. And this was also the mental perspective of the father of yoga, who was Shankara's teacher in another lifetime, a later lifetime. His name was Patanjali. He reincarnated as Govindapada, who was Gaudapada's student, and Shankara was his student. So this was the perspective of the father of yoga too. You get into samadhi, 4 different kinds. One with outer thought and outer objects, one with inner thought and inner objects, then one with refined ego, and one with bliss. Savitarka, Savichara, Sananda, and Sasmita, those are seated samadhis that you get into. So you can be in a samadhi of knowledge. If you're listening with perfect attention right now, you are in samadhi of knowledge right now. You don't have to wait for it. If your eye is single and you're concentrated, you have the 6th limb mastered, you're not falling asleep, and you're concentrated on everything that's being said, and you understand this very high cerebral level of dharmic teaching, then you're having a samadhi of knowledge. Now can you hold it? I had Samadhi of Knowledge in your class. Okay, call me tomorrow. Let's see if you still have it. Can you hold it till next week's class? Or is the world going to steal it away from you? Is the mind going to come down? Like Sri Ramakrishna liked that song. My mind was soaring like a kite in the highest realms of teachings. Then came a rough, hot wind of karma's, the rough, hot sin of karma's winds, and drove that kite to the ground. So when the mind gets into its cycles, are you going to be able to keep it up in that high wind? Because he used to say, I said, down here it's a hot day, but just a few hundred feet up there, the wind's blowing. So he wanted to let you know that you can raise your kite any day, even when it seems otherwise. So these are the key points of the practice. I have probably as much to say about that as about this, because this is just simple. Everything is in your mind. And not just as a figment of your imaginations, like the Western psychotherapist might tell you. Actually, it's all in your mind. Literally. Verily. And the mind is empty, and it's also radiant. We're getting to that. That might be the big surprise after the break here. But let's look at the third point here, the key points to action. So I have my perspective beautifully presented to me, and I have the practice I need to sustain that. Now what am I going to do in I act? The action of naturalness, in that the 10 virtues spontaneously grow, and the 10 vices are thus purified. So errant thoughts, anger, and in Buddhism basically it's anger, jealousy, hatred. See, in Vedanta it's a little bit different. Lust, anger, greed, envy, and so forth. Pride. So the basic errant thoughts, or the antithesis to the view, are described in little different ways, but it's basically the passions that come upon the mind. That get them into anger, that get them into jealousy, that get them into lust, and so forth. So in the action of naturalness, the virtues grow and the vices go away. Almost just what I was saying, wasn't it? Is that if you ever notice, if you just keep your mind in the teachings, you don't have any problem with the lower runs of the mind. But if you let the mind become idle, then all of a sudden your mind is thinking all sorts of silly or unwise things. So you have to control it in all cases, including in dreaming and deep sleep. If you can control your mind in dream and deep sleep, then you've made deep progress into understanding the word. Om. A is waking, U is dreaming, and M is deep sleep. So if you can put those three together, control it, then you've made substantial progress in knowing the nature of the word, which would be much like knowing the mind here. So many correlations to make. So if the 10 virtues and the 10 vices are both in the mind, it's the next question for most practitioners. Well, how come the virtues are there but the vices come dancing back? It doesn't sound like mind is very pure and radiant to me. It's got all these potentials in it. So let's go on. By corrections or remedies, the illuminating void is never disturbed in any way. These are the key points of action. So just like a Jativada, Brahman is pure and perfect. It's not affected by anything that people do or think, or anything that happens in nature. It's pure and perfect at all times, without any reservations or without any imperfections foisted upon it. So this gets back to the idea that the mind is both empty and luminous. Emptiness we can study after the break, because objects in Buddhism are said to be empty, and there are certain rules which we can understand that by. And I'll tell you those after the break. But let's finish this Maha Mudra teaching. These are the three aspects then of Maha Mudra, the Great Seal. And it says here, reduce inwardly these 3 points to one. There is no nirvana to attain beyond. There is no samsara here to renounce. So, this heaven-seeking soul or the hell-fearing soul, these are all been thoughts that arose in that self-same mind. And one of them was an errant thought, and the other one was a higher thought. But you haven't practiced non-thought, non-doing, see, as they tell you to do in the practice. So when these errant thoughts rise, whether they be higher or lower, virtues or vices, then you're to put them to the run by the main truth. See, emptiness and radiance, emptiness and radiance. The Great Seal is upon everything because it came out of the mind, projection. Now if my mind is pure and it projects, then it's got these kingdoms of heaven. See, my Father's mansion has many chambers. You have these beautiful worlds. Even here could be a beautiful world. But if the mind is not pure and perfect, when it engages in the sankalpic process, we have a word for it, then it's going to be a different matter. That's how people project worlds of pleasure and pain, life and death, and so forth, and believe in them out of these minds that are not in possession of the great view, or the great practice, or the great action, how to sustain it. So all of these things then are very important to meditate on and to meld them into one. There's no nirvana there to attain because somebody told me you should get nirvana, you should get enlightened. But how can you get something that is already yours? See, you just have to waken up to it. And there's no samsara there to renounce. So I don't need to worry about that. That's all projection of the mind. If I purify the mind, samsara goes away. So key points of the practice go with the key points of the view, and the action is then the result. Non-doing, non-self-effort. It's non-duality described to a T by one of these beautiful traditions influenced by Mother India. Now there you see, as we wrap up the first half, the final central practice of the Maha Mudra. It has to do with basis, path, and result. The basis of all is that all phenomena bear the seal of combined emptiness and luminosity. All phenomena, so acts, events, things, objects, bodies, people, they bear that internal seal of perfection. Isn't it much like in Vedanta, all is Brahman? It's just like saying that in Advaita Vedanta. All this is Brahman. But if the mind says that without realizing it, then it's committing a trespass against the truth. It hasn't yet realized it, yet it's proposing it, or it's affirming it. So it's still premature. So to know in Tibetan Buddhism, the Maha Mudra, that everything bears the seal of a combined emptiness and luminosity is a double safeguard. Empty because nothing then in the mind can fulfill you. And everything is empty of substance. So you don't get attached to it. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, you have no place to lay your head. All these statements become clear to you, and you're free. See, you're free. You don't take anything in this world to be real. And you maintain that view. I mean, it's all based in this view of mind-only schools. That's why Holy Mother said, you can free yourself right now if you become desireless. Yes, desireless. What's the Sanskrit? Nirvashana. See, Holy Mother said, you can free yourself right now if you become desireless. It's your last lifetime. So, much like is being said here in Tibetan Buddhism in terms of this first principle. Know that it's all empty, and know that it's also luminous. Because you can't do away with the light of Brahman. Yet all of these things mar the light of Brahman, if you consider them to be real, you see. So, heaven's lights shine, earth's shadows fly. The mind is a many-colored dome which stains the pure white light of eternity. I am paraphrasing the poet Shelley. Percy Blythe Shelley. Found out how to pronounce his middle name. So that was something from an English poet that my teacher used to quote. Heaven's light shines, earth's shadows fly. Life is a many-colored dome which stains the pure white light of eternity. So the mind is like a dome with many crystals, colors. Light from beyond it filters through it and turns into life. So almost a shortcut way of saying na mano, na buddhi, na sharira, tanmatram, indriyam, bhutani, bhuta all of these are crystals. And the light came and shone through them, and it reflected as the world all around me. My children, my houses, my cars, my money, my everything. And if those things were based in desire, then I'm not yet ready to understand the emptiness in everything. When I see the emptiness in it, and it depresses me, life has no more meaning, you see. That's a problem. It's where the emptiness principle got people into trouble. But Tibet came along and said, guess what? It's empty, but meditate on that emptiness. Nobody ever thought of that. So I see nothing here can fulfill me. See, why? Because I'm my own fulfillment. It all came out of me. See, I have everything, which is actually the subtitle to our next series of classes. See, the soul has everything within it that it needs. It doesn't need all this world, because all this world came out of it. So you're putting it all back to square one. You're dissolving all back into Brahman, however you want to call it or tell it. I've said that in 3 or 4 different ways in this first half of the class. We'll finish up with the rest of this in the second half after a 15-minute break. Thank you for your kind attentions. And we are
How's that?
We have our final half to our third and final class of this series. It's been wonderful to speak on these two religious traditions that I hold joint citizenship in, as like Sixon used to say, about 3 or 4 that he had taken up and studied deeply, and especially around the thread that runs through the whole string of pearls. That is Dharma, all the Dharmic teachings, now evinced by some 350 charts that I've managed to create to explain it to us in this day and age. But that non-dual element running through them all, giving them their ability to shine, just like emptiness and luminosity. You have to say maybe that I have to realize this world is insubstantial, unreal, illusory, ephemeral, a manifestation of the mind, however you want to put it. A false superimposition over Brahman would be how it would be put in Vedanta, Vivarta, the Sanskrit word. You have to realize that and come to that place of emptying the mind of everything that it broods upon or dotes on or entertains, and come to a state of emptiness like Jesus did under the tree and Buddha did under the bo tree, before you can get that teaching of luminosity rising out of everything. That might be a way of putting it, like stages. And I think in my tradition of Vedanta, I think basically emptiness is followed by fullness. And I think that's how you would describe the two words shunyata and purnyata. Or the practice, in terms of practice, neti neti, not this, to iti iti, all this. Or in Tantra, sublimation of everything, rather than just rejection from it. So yoga, Tantra, Buddhism, Vedanta, they all have their ways of saying this, and particular language that goes with them, whether it be the ancient Sanskrit, the Pali Sanskrit that was used at the time of Lord Buddha, or Tibetan Buddhism in more current time. All of these things are being said, and to speak about traditions from the standpoint of Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta, that is, that all of this is seen by the great souls like the avatars as not having to be harmonized, that it's already unified at all times. Other people are into arguing about different traditions, which one's better, and that's Prati Tantra Siddhanta. Siddhanta means a conclusion. And then others talk about Sarva Tantra Siddhanta. Let's bring them all together and harmonize them. But the great souls are never at those two levels. They're always at the level of Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta. It's all naturally one. And you can't bring it together. It's just your mind fragmented it, caused separations, divisions, and so then you had to go back and make the connections, as we've been saying. Those connections have become rusty in our day and age, in our thinking process today, in a country that our parents didn't give us the Dharma, whereas other countries like India had that boon. But even in modern day India, and even India at the time of Swami Vivekananda in the 1800s, had fallen out of knowledge of those connections. And so it's the Kali Yuga, folks. This is the age of darkness, and the only good thing we have here about that is that the light just becomes all the brighter when there's darkness. So if we can bring in light into that cave, as Sri Ramakrishna said, the cave that's been dark for 1,000 years, the minute the light's in, the darkness does not take 1,000 years to go away. It goes away instantly. So that's the idea of darkness being unreal, or ignorance being unreal. And that this, if we have a mind that is in knowledge of the view, and also is doing the practice, and then follows through with the coordinate action, then we have a mind that's fit for non-dual presence. Then God will come and dwell as our very own consciousness. That is, appear in us. And there you have the final dictums of everyone from Lord Vashishta through to Lord Buddha, Sri Krishna, Lord Buddha, and Sri Ramakrishna in this present time. That that thou art, or I am that, Brahman. Those kinds of statements are called the four great statements in India, Mahavakyas. Well, we'll get to that hopefully today. We want to finish this first, Maha Mudra style, and say that we saw that all phenomena bear the seal of combined emptiness and luminosity. Something to contemplate. The words I've said about it so far are very clear and I hope clarifying for the mind, so that it seems easier to contemplate it now. And you should take this out of this room, which is emptiness and luminosity. Take it out into that world out there, which is also stamped with emptiness and luminosity. Take it back to your own home, which is also in emptiness and luminosity. And remind yourself, remind the mind of that. That even everything down to objects are seen that way. As, say, Shankara says in some of his beautiful hymns, like Yamagnushnavat Nicha Bodha Swarupam Manas Chakshuradim Yabodatmakani Pravartanta Ashrita Nishkampam Evam Sanicha Palabdis Swarupohamatma Mukha Basako Darpanedrishamano Mukhatvam Pritak Vena Naivasti Vastu Chidabasako Deshu Jivopi Tadvat Sanicha Palabdis Swarupohamatma Yata Darpana Bhava Abasahano Mukam Vijite Kapanahinam Ekam Tata Diviyoge Nirabasa Koyaha Sanicha Palabdis Swarupohamatma Sanicha Palabdis Swarupohamatma. In these three verses of the Hasta Amalaka Stotram, the fruit in the palm of the hand Stotram, means this truth should be as obvious to you as the truth in the palm, fruit in the palm of your hand. You should be able to see it. You know, take it out, look at it. Yes, that's clear, that's clear. So, and also written by Hasta Amalaka, one of Shankara's greatest disciples, who didn't speak a word most all his young life until Shankara asked him the question, "Who are you?" And he sang this. The first words he ever uttered. So, these three verses of these numbered verses say, comforting and life-giving, like the quality of warmth and fire, whose nature is always awake, all abiding and one without a second, who animates inert objects, mind and senses, and engages them in action. And that limitless self am I, sublime and indivisible. As the reflection in a mirror is identical with the object reflected, so is the universe identical with the self reflected in the mirror of pure mind. Thus are living beings perfect images of the eternal subject, the undying self. And that limitless self am I, identical with the Supreme Being. Remove the reflective surface, and the form disappears. What remains is the formless essence, the objectless reality. Like this, when the eternal mind is stilled and focused on reality, what is left is oneness, the eternal abode, my true existence. So of these verses, these three particularly deal with objects, senses, and mind. And with mind, we know the perspective of Maha Mudra and how it looks at objects and senses, empty and luminous at the same time. Really covers a base for us, a way of thinking that we're not really considering in this day and age. Easier probably to go to it in some ways. But in Tibetan Buddhism, this would be one of the final teachings you'd get when you're qualified for it. Last week we showed what the practice, the precepts, the principles, and so forth were like, leading up to it, leading up to Maha Mudra. So we have not transgressed that law. We have shown you last week how the Tibetan Buddhist practitioner comes to that elevated, qualified level, and then what it means to them after they have been qualified. This will act as an example for us to do the same, whether we take it up in this tradition or whether we look at it in Advaita Vedanta. So to finish up these three principles of practice there, that is central practice of Maha Mudra, you see there the first was basis. We talked about that as everything has the seal of emptiness and luminosity. B is the path. When you direct effortless experience of the nature of pure mind, then when flourishing, when focusing occurs, focus without objective. When stabilizing occurs, stabilize without distraction. When shifting occurs, shift without grasping. When manifestations occur, experience them as reality. So this is point 2, 4-part. That is, the path is direct, effortless experiences of the nature of pure mind. Direct, effortless experiences. So again, it's not a laborious thing. It's spontaneous and natural. As if, since Brahman is really the simplest thing, your true nature, non-dual truth and light, and there are different paths which you will have to go through purification of various things, like mind, senses, and so forth. But if you're not taking the right perspective, that all of these things came out of your own mind, then you might fall into some problems like, I'll ask God for help, or the devil's in my way, or my karma is too thick, I can't do anything, I'm too bound. I'm a sinner instead of perfect. And on, people are trying to approach this simple, spontaneous truth with the wrong perspective. Everything in your mind is a loaded statement. We know that here in the West. But here, how they mean it is very sublime and very powerful, that all manifestations and all phenomena are occurring in the mind. They're not occurring in Brahman. And Sri Krishna makes that clear in the Bhagavad Gita too. All activity takes place in nature, not in your soul, he tells Arjuna. All manifestations, changes, and so forth take place in nature, not in your soul. So he's describing your soul as not just birthless, deathless, timeless and all that, but actionless. Does it sound like spontaneousness here in the Maha Mudra? So I'll repeat it just so we can see it again. When focusing occurs, focus without objective. So you see everything coming into focus in your meditation, and don't all of a sudden put some sort of objective over it, like you have to attain something, because that's going to push it further away. You should let it arise spontaneously, naturally, and see it that way. Otherwise you may put some quick impediments in the way of your vision, or whatever is coming to you. It's like trying to remember your dream and it's fading faster and faster because you're trying to use memory in that non-spontaneous way. So it has to be supreme naturalness that you're seeking here. The nectar of naturalness. Jnanamritam samarasam. See, as we sang last week, the Avadut sings. When stabilizing occurs, stabilize without distraction. So you're on a certain track, you see you have to make an adjustment, you do it immediately without getting distracted from the truth that everything is empty and spontaneous. Because you might get distracted by saying, oh, I think maybe everything isn't empty, or maybe everything isn't radiant. All of a sudden that errant thought, which is not in the Dharmakaya, insinuates itself on you, and you can't stabilize in the right way. So anytime you have to make an adjustment, it's not out of seeing an error, it's out of just stabilizing and not being distracted. Keeping the truth first and foremost in mind. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. It didn't say thou shalt know the truth and have distractions along the way. And that's going to get you free. 3, when shifting occurs, shift without grasping. So, say you're at a junction in your meditation where you see everything is empty and that the objects can't fulfill you. So in that case then, you have to make that shift without grasping to things that you just should have let go of already. You're having the chance to let go of them again, so you open your hands off, so you let it pass and don't grasp onto it. That grasping, selfish grasping, has been a very demonic kind of movement in the mind. Now you're at a level where you're beginning to be able to let go of these things in lieu of spiritual fruits. So when you see the spiritual fruits start to ripen on the vine, you have to realize that the whole tree is inside yourself. See? And not otherwise. So those fruits are only graspable and attainable if you stay free of distraction and you don't grasp after things. On top of that then, finally, experience them all as reality. That is, when manifestations occur, experience them all as reality. You're past the potential problem of Maya, see, of getting attached to Maya. Now you're seeing everything as Brahman. So there's a cusp there where you have to let go of all as Maya and then get to all as Brahman. You have to get over the neti-neti into the iti-iti. You have to get over the shunyata, emptiness, into purnyata, fullness. And there's a juncture and a time in which you should be able to do that and make that shift. But when you make the shift, do it without grasping. And when you make the adjustment, do it without distraction. When focusing occurs for you, don't have any objective around it. And all these manifestations then have to be seen as reality, or I would say can be seen as reality at that point. Before they were seen as phenomena, empty only. But where's that radiance? Where's that luminosity? It has to come into the picture. You can't just stay in emptiness and then expect to reach the Maha Mudra seal of everything. Everything is. Nobody says it's not. Everyone says I am. Nobody can say I am not. So you can go on discriminating away everything, but you can never discriminate away the one who's doing the discriminating. So you are. I am. At some point that has to be attested to and then affirmed. And with no going back. And then you won't have to shift or stabilize or focus anymore. This is that state of naturalness that you see these great souls in. Like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. There's a fifth one. When liberation occurs, allow it to occur naturally. It's not something that you're going to say, well, there was a nirvana beyond that I had to attain, and there's a samsara here that I'm still having to renounce. And that was defeated. That duality, very high duality, admittedly, has been defeated by the three-part Maha Mudra. Now you can get to the business of realizing Maha Mudra, seeing it stamped upon your very soul or your mind. So let that occur naturally to you, and no resistance necessary. You might say even after the affirmation stage, there's nothing left to do but just give up into it, surrender yourself into it, like a hailstone into an ocean. It's been described like that. May we make an offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. One of the peace chants that we chant. Beautiful. One of the 7 peace chants. So when we make this offering, the small self and the great self, it has to be 100%. Can't be any hesitation or taking back, or doubting. This is why stage by stage avasta-like practice is very essential to Advaita Vedanta, also essential to these teachings of non-duality and other traditions. Now that's been A and B in 5 parts. Now let's look at C, the result. This is the principles of the central practice of Maha Mudra. We saw the 3 views, the 3 elements there. Now we have explained deeper the central practice. The result is that you get freedom from liberation, an agent of liberation. As long as one is saying, I want to be free, then there's an agent there that thinks itself not to be free, when freedom is its very nature. So that's a very subtle thing, and it goes very late in the game. Speak about grasping onto certain things. This isn't the soul that's grasping onto food, or grasping onto senses or sense objects, or grasping onto some sattva in the mind, some pleasure and some balance. No, they're far beyond that already. They're adept practitioners. They're not beginning practitioners. And so in that case then, the very subtle dualities are to be let go of. And so they're not going to grasp onto the agent of liberation. I was once bound, I'm going to get free. Doesn't that sound pretty much like shifting? See? And so if that does happen, you have to shift without grasping. And you also want freedom from intellection and conceptualization. You also want freedom from false identities and from hopes and fears. So, say peace to all, from me no danger be to aught that lives, from those who dwell on high to those who lowly creep, I am the self in all. All worlds both here and there do I renounce, all heavens, all hells, all hopes and all fears. Thus cut thy bonds, said Swami Vivekananda in one of his verses, the Song of the Sannyasin. Say peace to all. So hopes and fears are admittedly present at the end of the game, all the way up to the end of the game. They just have higher and higher elements to consider and let go of. Your hope might have been for something very base at one point, or it might have been for liberation at another, but you see how that's also has to be let go of. The agent of liberation has to go. The ego, even in its refined state, will have to go. Ramakrishna said that there's the unripe ego and there's the ripe ego. Lord Vashishta put that in terms of the 3 kinds of ego. Pretty much ripe, unripe, ripe, and supreme. So the supreme ego is the sakshahamkara, the witness ego. So that's beyond the ripe ego of the devotee and beyond the ego of the deluded or worldly soul. So let those words finish up for us the Maha Mudra, and let's look then, segue right into emptiness. We have to look a little bit more at emptiness in terms of what the meaning of objects are. So while we're still here in Buddhism, this comes forth very nicely. Now, you see that this begins to take on elements of not just Buddhism, but also Samkhya and Vedanta, pretty much thinking in the same ways. Up the left-hand side, or your right-hand side, is this gauge from gross prana to psychic prana to chit shakti, which is the thoughts on reality. Divine Mother is chit shakti according to the Father of Yoga. So we just chanted Om Mano Na Buddhi Na Shariram Indriyam, Tanmatram, na Bhutani, na Bhutatpanchakam, all those sets of fives have to be dissolved into Brahman. It's one of the dissolving the mind stream practices in yoga and Vedanta. So here you have something of a similar thing. Solid objects, then gross elements, and then gross senses, and then thought objects. These are actually, if you're a practitioner of this kind of dissolution of the mind stream, you're seeing they're empty, and empty as you meditate upon them and classify them. How would you meditate on them and classify them? Through these yogic rules. One, that objects are empty. How do I know that? They're empty of abiding substance, because even science will tell you that. They're just particles changing at a billionth of a second. Christ called that shifting sand, and you wouldn't want to build your house on it, he said. You want to build it on bedrock. So you can't build your objects, your life on shifting particles. If you do, then you're deluded, and you must see them all as empty. Now, think back on the Maha Mudra, because the first view was that the whole universe exists in the mind. So now if I'm looking at the object from the standpoint of physical science, physics, then it's empty without any place to go. There's no particle finer than subatomic particles. I got through atoms and quarks and neutrons, finally got to subatomic particles, changing at a billionth of a second. A billionth of a second is no lifetime. You see? You have to go up to the subatomic particle and go, get a life. So emptiness takes on an actual importance to us when, even with our electron microscopes and what we know from today, we're seeing that all of this is shifting sands, and we can't build our houses upon it. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you don't have any place to lay your head here. In fact, even the birds with nests and the foxes with holes came out of your own mind. And so you're putting it all together with a teaching like Maha Mudra, which came later in the game as a sort of refined, sophisticated, matured system of looking at it with those three views, or the view of the practice and the action. So you don't see any abiding substance in objects, so now you're grasping at something that's not there. You're also thinking that the objects are different from you and other than you, but they're just your thoughts made concretized. So there's some things in the process here that you're not taking into account that has a solidifying effect on things that are empty, things that are continually changing. What is it? Call it Maya, call it samsara, but you might want to get closer to it than that, because you've got subtle elements, subtle senses, projected worlds, thoughts, and the ego behind it. See, how is that making everything solid? Because there are billions of egos. Not just on Earth, but in your ancestors are billions of egos. And the celestials, billions of egos. And the deities, billions of subtler egos. So you've got a congealing power inside of these instruments called tattvas, and an intelligence that's operating them that is not yet aware of teachings like the Maha Mudra. It's not aware of what the seers know. That's why Buddha wanted you off of that wheel. So if you look at the facts as the way they are from the perspective of the way the yogi sees it, then he's going to say they're empty of abiding substance. And I can put a period on that by saying, number two, that I've not found them fulfilling. Why? Because people who are egos are continually grabbing onto them again for thousands of lifetimes. For cycles without end. Cycles that are changing constantly, cycles that are therefore to be called parinama, not aparinama. cycles that are transforming when Brahman doesn't transform, cycles of birth and death when my soul is never born and died. So this is root ignorance. They have a word for it in India, mula vidya, root ignorance. It's going all the way back to every lifetime you took, and the first lifetime that you decided to enter into in any given cycle. You might want to rethink that. Rethink it at a higher level. Because when you think it at a lower level, you're putting yourself into the worlds of name and form and time and space. The very thing which the souls renounced to get to higher levels of thinking. So, objects are just thought made manifest. Now you have to convince yourself of that, you have to see the emptiness of them and their inability to fulfill you, because those two things are getting in your way. You're thinking the world is real and that objects are the end-all and be-all of life, that they can give me pleasure without knowing that they also bring me pain. How can the objects fail me? They can get stolen. You can become bored with them. They can get destroyed by fire and other things. There's so many ways in which objects keep letting you down, and you're still grasping onto them. So this is why point number one has a twofold meaning. First, you have to see that they're empty of substance. Now remember, here we're not talking about being empty of essence, because in the Maha Mudra they're empty, they're full of essence. See? That's called what?
Luminosity.
Luminosity. So they're empty plus luminosity. So we're not looking at that here, we're thinking of them right now as they're being empty, and they're also empty of the ability to fulfill. Once I make that conclusion, then I can graduate to the radiance and everything. Then the objects, doesn't matter whether they're real or unreal, whether they're changing at a billionth of a second or whether they're actual. They might as well be actual. Some seers have said, Shristi, Stiti, Vada, because they're real as long as I behold them, but tonight in deep sleep they go away. Tonight in dream the couch becomes dream particle couch. It's still there and I can still sit on it, but that's down here at the level of subtle elements. Swamiji said, you don't know about subtle elements here, we call them tanmatras, and you don't know about them in the West because you don't know that the second level of your consciousness is dreaming. And the third level of your consciousness is deep sleep. And the first is waking, and that's called A, U, and M in my tradition. Spells Om. So these are the three levels of every being's consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Jagrat, Swapja, and Swapna, and Shushupti. And there's a fourth beyond, called Turiya, that's beyond all states. That would be like Maha Mudra kind of essence. So not empty of essence, empty of substance, and empty of the ability to fulfill you. Sometimes these are turned around on each other. Monastics will start at the whole problem by saying, they'll never fulfill me, therefore I give them up. Monastics of that kind are not the kind yet that have realized that there's radiance in them. They're renouncing out of aversion, or they're renouncing with good intentions but without coming the full cycle. Because now I can see everything as being empty, but what else do I see? That they're all mental projections. Point number two. These are yogic rules pertinent to objects. One was 2 point. It's almost like a Maha Mudra teaching in yoga. So number two was they're all mental projections. A are solidified thought, objects, that is. B are not created out of nothing or by God. So here's two very important points on the level of this rule of objects or mental projections. Shall we go back? The view is what again? All phenomena, the entire universe is in the mind. So you can see here, They're projections, and how they are brought about is through thought. And then they become projected worlds, subtle senses, subtle elements get into the picture, dream elements, dream thoughts. Then you wake up and they become your gross senses and your gross elements. Then they become solid elements. And you reverse this process back to the ego when you go to sleep, in deep sleep. And then you project it again when you wake up. And how many billions of souls are doing this? On how many different levels of worlds? Not just the physical. So if you want to put, a fine point, or maybe call it flesh it out from the Maha Mudra, then you'd look back at these rules for objects and clarify it. Oh, I see why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking, and how they thought the way they thought, and how they're trying to convince me of the same. So that I can be free, wake up from this dream of worlds and objects, projected by my own mind. So they are all mental projections out of your own mind. They're solidified thought, and they're not created out of nothing or by God. Those two things have been tripping me up. I thought God created the worlds because that's what I heard from someone. But God doesn't create. God is a create. Nothing is originated, everything is unoriginated. So when in the beginning was the Word, was told by Jesus to John, he didn't want John to think in terms of origination. He wanted him to think in terms of non-origination. Christianity took the ball and ran with it, that origination was true. To a certain extent, yes, if you take it back to the Word. But what is the Word? Did the Word ever get explained to the Church Fathers? It did in India, to all the seers. They meditated on it. They dissolved their waking state into their dream state. They dissolved all dreams into deep sleep state, and that was the first level of formlessness that they came upon. And in that formlessness they saw the seeds to everything. They were in thought. When consciousness came and used thought as the ego, it projected these worlds. When consciousness came and left the ego out of the quotient, it went back to non-dual awareness via its own intelligence. Chit-shakti here. That's mother wisdom. Otherwise, psychic prana and gross prana were always in the mix. Shall we go back to the action? We had the view, we had the practice, and we had the action, right? Well, we go back to the action in Tibetan Buddhism, you'll see that these are questionable. These are to be taken with a grain of salt and to be steered clear of. Or that if you do use prana, you use them as a yogi or a yogini. And otherwise you get attracted to the tricks of prana. That's a quote from Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. The worlds of Maya are all the tricks of prana. So you don't really need a lot of magic. You see a lot of sleight of hand, a lot of prestidigitation. You've got enough of it right here. You don't need a magic show by some magician or some other person. You've got everything you need happening in front of you right now. That's a circus of that kind of stuff. A cosmic circus. So your responsibility in all of this is to use the prana of the breath to get to the psychic prana, which is energy of the mind to create thoughts. Use that psychic prana to get back to the source of everything, Chit Shakti, the mother. Use that mother to get into the Word, beyond to the primal vibration. So your thoughts have to become buoyant and charged up. That would be two other rules we'd put here, Sri Ramakrishna's description of objects and energy. You have to first charge up your thoughts, and you have to make your mind buoyant. And that would be then naturally transcending all of this. Your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep would look entirely different to you if you did that. In fact, you'd probably sing like the Advaita. I could get the verse out right now and say, when I looked into the past to the mind, I find out that my mind was non-existent, that I never had a mind that had thoughts. when I look into my past lifetimes, I found out that I never had a body to commit action. That's a person speaking a Jativada language. Here, let me explain it to you from the way I don't think about it anymore. People have been telling you about the mind and all its variances of thought and everything. Let me speak to you in the terms of non-thought. So we jumped from here, then over to here, these rules. Now, just as an overall example here, you can see how Dalai Lama has told us in this age, because I heard him say this in one of his talks. So then found this image, wrote a book on it, but then put it into a simple little teaching here, is that there are 3 levels of consciousness, like A, U, and M. One's external, one's internal, and one's transcendent. It sort of sounds like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, although the transcendent bridges on the non-dual from the deep sleep. So basically, you can see here that the external points to the solidified tree. That's been congealed by your mind, right? You had a thought of tree, you had a thought of many trees, you had a thought of many forests, you had a thought of peopling the world, filling the world with forests. You had billions of people thinking that way, and so there was the world spread out when you woke up. When you woke up means when you were born. When I first saw the light of this world, all the sins from my past lives attacked me. Mosquitoes lit on me. I was helpless. Flies lit on me. I was helpless. There's a stotram to Shiva about that. When I first saw the light of this world, it's called. Page 1001 in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, if you want to look it up. Big long stotram. In some versions, it's page 999. So first, taking the idea of the tree, then there's the illusory tree. The tree you're looking at is the illusion tree. Haven't we just proven it to you, at least philosophically, because, and even physically, that when you take a portion of the tree, pit of its bark, and look at it, it's just vibrating particles. So it's appearing to you as something other than it really is. Your eyes, your senses, which are right here, are not able to see into beyond the appearance of the tree. You're going to have to use your mind to do that. So the tree is to be renounced. Birds have nests, foxes have holes. Birds also have trees, and foxes have tree roots. So, did he say, you lay your head there? Or did he say, give them up, renounce them, follow me, give up your money, give up everything and follow me? So, you might not be able to do that with Jesus at this very moment, but you can do it in your mind with the mental Jesus, because that's also a construct in your mind. That's a very high construct. He's still there, and still the father of millions of people. Is he the only father of millions of people? Yes. If you look at it non-dually, because there's only one soul. There cannot be more than one soul. You're talking about senses, bodies, objects, and so forth. There are many of those. But when you get here, there's just one true divine being. Its essence is formless, but its substance has different names, different forms, called avatars, divine incarnations, mahasiddhas, mahatmas, yogis, avatuts, Buddhas. So these great souls are there, all that one essence. So again, Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta, you don't need to argue which one's the best or which one's real and which one's not and so forth, or my watch keeps the only right time, as Sri Ramakrishna said. Give that up and see them all as one indivisible divine being. an indeterminate mass of pure conscious awareness. Solid object tree then. Well, what's the next level of tree? Atomic particle tree, and that's the real tree. See here it says the real tree, but it's not the essence tree. The real tree that you're looking at is particles, and your senses are not geared to see that. But they will be tonight in dream. You'll be putting together a particle tree of your own devising with your mind. What do you think dreams are? Someone else's? You'll be walking through a forest of many trees, and it's all a projection of your own mind. Runners running a race in a dream. Through woods in that case. So if you go beyond that, it's when the tree becomes a seed. See? And that's getting close toward the essence tree. How did all these things come out? They came out of intelligence. Cosmic awareness was beyond that, and it all came out of the Word. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning of many cycles. But those cycles themselves are unoriginated. All is unoriginated. Gaudapada's final conclusion. It pertains to your supreme soul, whether you call it self or Buddha nature. It pertains to nature, which is primordial, made out of seeds and so forth. That's also unoriginated and keeps coming back. It pertains to your lifetimes, also unoriginated but keeps coming back. So everything is unoriginated. It's just a matter of whether it's on a cycle or free of that cycle. The seers want you free of those cycles. And then you're the witness. Your ego, which is ahamkara, is now sakshahamkara. It's the witness ego of everything. And from there, it can give itself up into Brahman. There, the hailstone has a chance of dissolving into its own essence, called the ocean. So, there's the three kinds of trees. So, you can see that one's the internal tree from up here. And then there's the transcendent tree, Buddha nature tree, essence tree, or what we would call Atman or Paramatman. So that's the essence in everything. So you can see how this chart on the meaning of objects helps us understand the Maha Mudra better, and how they would talk about emptiness, but also how they would slip that beautiful and endearing and galvanizing idea of luminosity into the whole picture, to escape the problems of the Mayavadins, like, oh, it's all illusion, therefore I just give it up. But I never know that that illusion was projected by my own mind. That's a very important part of the Indian traditions. So then let's read this final quote. Most beings beholding physical objects such as trees, animals, planets, etc., assume them to be real or actual. However, modern science has uncovered the atomic particle tree. Philosophy teaches about the illusory tree, its display being only an appearance. The luminaries, going deeper, speak of the Atman tree, or Buddha nature tree. Thus, there are three levels to existence: the external, the internal, and the absolute. Knowing about this triple subdivision, along with the nature of each, the human mind espies the truth about all manifestation and simply swiftly frees itself from the bondage to objects. What is that truth about all manifestation? That it's empty and it's luminous at the same time. That's freeing the mind right there in its thinking process. Now you have to bring consciousness into the picture, you see. In other words, ordinary mind has to become pure mind. Thine eye has to become single, if you want to put it that way. You're seeing everything from the three lower chakras, which is eating, sleeping, and sex life, procreation. You're not seeing everything from love thy father first and foremost, or from, Dharma, or from if thine eye be single, you shall know the truth, or from Maha Mudra position itself. That's where your consciousness needs to gravitate or graduate to in order to see the truth. My teacher used to say you can never get to the infinite through the finite. So you're going to have to renounce the finite and realize the infinite. He used to say, don't idealize the real, realize the ideal. So if you idealize the real, then everything, becomes a stumbling block on your way to the ideal. You're idealizing it. That's right here, with ego and thought. But to realize the ideal means the non-dual Brahman. It means the Almighty Father. It means the Buddha nature. Tathagata. It means so many other things, you see, that have names for it. Like that one beautiful chant out of the Rig Veda. Om Indram Mitram Varunamagni Natarajo Divyaha Sasuparna Garutman Ekam Sat Vipra Buhuda Vedanti Yaman Matarish Vanamahu Ekam Sat Vipra Buhuda Vedanti. I wonder where that came from. So I had to look it up in the Rig Veda. I mean, it's thousands of slokas. And I traced it down and I found that. Because Vedanta uses that for there is one truth, many paths leading to it. Ekam Sat, one truth. Vipra Bahuda Vedanti. So Vedanta declares that there's one truth and many paths leading to it. But along with that, it says, in the meantime, as you're following that great truth, that is the ideal, you're trying to realize the ideal, you see echelons of consciousness opening up to yourself. Like Indram, Mitram, Varunamagni, Matarato Divyaha, Saparna, Garutman. Garutman is Brahma. He's a great dragon bird. And he carries your soul inward. Talk to Vishnu about that one, because he's got Garuda as his mount. Vishnu's mount is that great dragon bird. What else? So the seers call this great being by different names. They call him by Agni, the fire of yoga. They call him by Varuna, the wind of breathless heights. They call him by the destroyer of death. They call him the carrier of consciousness, Garuda. They call him by so many different names, including the light that reveals everything. The one who shines forth the light, is how it should be put. A beautiful chant in the Rig Veda, the earliest of all scriptures of the world, carbon dated the earliest. So there you see this underpinnings of both Tibetan Buddhism and Yoga Vedanta. See it with a little Samkhya thrown in here. Now, our time is limited to 15 more minutes. I think I might be able to do the Ajativada simply because this kind of proved or supported the Maha Mudra. Let's look on your left-hand side there to the great stargate in the sky, if you want to call it that, and that soul that's headed toward that non-dual awareness, whether you want to call it Brahman or moksha. Moksha means, and mukti means an enlightenment that's always at hand. It's not something that you can gain by anything. It's always at hand. So they look at freedom differently in the Indian traditions. It's not something to be gained by transformation or something to be gained by evolution or by purifying the mind of sin or any of those things. It's always at hand. They start off on that premise, just like Maha Mudra starts out with this mind being, all things being in the mind. Formlessness, I'm mixing up Sanskrit words with English here to give us a full bouquet. Transcendence, awareness, pure conscious awareness, Nirvikalpa. If you look into the meaning of the word kalpa, they usually use kalpanika, means imaginings in time. That's a real clue there. So if you're engaged in sankalpa or vikalpa, you're engaged in running a race in a dream. You're imagining things in time, you're projecting it out like this, and you're imagining yourself to be in time. But the soul's never in time, Krishna says in the Gita. It doesn't occupy space, Vivekananda says in his great teachings. Where is the time when the soul will come and go, when all of time is in the soul? Where's the space or location that it will come and go from, to and from, when all of space is in the soul? That's how Vivekananda put it to us. Very powerful way of describing it. So, nirvikalpa, nirvi, extinct. It's like nirvana. Or nirbija, no seeds. Father of Yoga said that. So nirvikalpa means all kalpas have been made extinct. All phases of time in which the soul imagines have gone away. Once one Swami told me, well, to understand a sannyasin like myself, Babaji, you're going to have to know that a sannyasin is a person who takes a canoe to a far distant island, and when he gets there, he burns it. The canoe would be like the body, going from place to place. He finds his way to the eternal island of Mother Reality, Divine Mother. When he gets there, oh, this mind, it cannot be trusted. I think I'll burn the whole vehicle. No seeds. Because I may be here and have some seeds that, oh, something's calling me back again. Could be a little baby, divine little baby, appearing in your meditation, calling you back. So I'd better burn that canoe. See? Nirvikalpa would be like that. Let's make the whole thing extinct so it'll never happen again. Then I can just remain myself, with a capital S, thank you. Chaitanya, one of the words for consciousness in Sanskrit. Kaivalya, that's Patanjali, the father of yoga, using it as a way of isolating yourself from nature. Yoga came forward in 140 AD at that point, 650 years after Lord Buddha and 140 years after Jesus, to declare that you must separate yourself from nature if you want to get freedom. It wasn't popular back then, and it's not popular today. One of those things that you're grasping after is nature. Nature provides the bed because birds have nests, foxes have holes. In nature, you lay your head in nature. But your soul is beyond nature. Purusha is different than Prakriti. Prakriti came out of Purusha. But somewhere along the line, when nature came out of the soul thought it was nature, and nature pulled a big loop on it and convinced itself that it was matter, and now the soul doesn't have any recourse but to be bound in matter. So therefore, the seeds of nature in deep sleep, you burn them. Burn that canoe. And you free yourself for all time. So Kaivalya is a pregnant word, typical of India's way of thinking or not thinking. Nirvana, there's a word I just mentioned. That's may everything made extinct. And finally, Satori. We go all the way to those 64 generations of Indian yogic Buddhism that found its way to Japan. And then that word called Satori happens. Very beautiful study. I have a bunch of charts on Zen Buddhism that sometimes we take up. So there we've taken 5 of our 10 minutes to look at these names. This is where this embodied soul that's departing space and time is headed for. It's headed beyond all locations in space and time. It took seriously what the seers told it, that you don't have any place to lay your head in nature or in space or in time, that we've just been reciting, and it's heading for emancipation, spiritual emancipation. Any word that you use for freedom is inadequate. It's something always at hand. But if you say, I'm going to get free, you're admitted you were once bound. The truth is you never were bound. You dreamt you were bound. Now you wake up from that, and it doesn't make any sense to talk about freedom, you see. Nevertheless, they have words for Brahman, and they have words for the state that you fall into when you remove all the barriers to yourself. When I and my Father become one. Because it was under the tree that he got that realization too. Just like Buddha, under the tree in the wilderness. Came out and said, I'm the light of the worlds. Buddha came out, didn't say it. He exuded it. Everyone came running to him who had renounced him because they thought he was crazy. But he shone with a light. So I am the light of the world. Buddha went so deep into it for his 49 or 50 days under the tree that he couldn't speak when he came out. Who does that sound like in our age? In the 1800s, Sri Ramakrishna going into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, not being able to speak when he came out for hours. You know what they did? Handed him a glass of water, put his finger in it. Ah, I know where I am now. I'm in the realm of the gross elements. Funny, I was just thinking about water when I came out of Samadhi. The subtle elements, see. Then it became gross elements. And then it became solid objects. And I did that all in a thrice. And I give it all up in a thrice. Consciousness is that fast. The mind is also very swift. Faster than the speed of sound is the speed of light. Faster than the speed of light is the speed of thought, or the mind. And faster than all of those, faster than the fastest, swifter than the swiftest, is Divine Mother Reality. And Atman doesn't need to be fast because it's already everywhere. We have a word for that in English that's very apropos, all-pervasive. If you're all-pervasive, you don't need to move from one place to other, which is why Brahman is everywhere and in everything. It's all-pervasive. So what do you need to do to realize Brahman? Shall we go back? See, shift without grasping, adjust without. See, it's all basically becoming that, isn't it? In your meditation, you take it on. Errant thoughts have to be liberated in the Dharmakaya. So errant thought would be, I'm a sinner. Errant thought would be, I grow. Errant thought would be, one religion is better than the other. Errant thought would be anything that comes in to distract me away from that one truth that I must assume in order to realize. Like a bowl of wax fruit across the room. I get thirsty looking at it. I go over. I realize it's not the real thing. But it does make me get up off my ass, go across the room, see that it's wax, and go out to the store to get the real thing. So just like that, you have to assume this position of being divine, of being who you really are. It's actually not a bad assumption at all, because you're just assuming the truth. It's not like you're assuming a lie or a half-truth. The seers, the gurus, the yogis have told you this is the truth, so why should it harm you to assume it? Practice samadhi. Shankara tells us in the Vivekachudamani. Why should you say, oh, I'll never have samadhi? It's your true nature. What did Sri Ramakrishna epitomize when he came here if it wasn't to show you that samadhi was your true nature? Vivekananda got into it, Brahmananda got into it, Holy Mother got into it. Or did they just come just to play a game in front of you? We're playing samadhi. Let's play the version of Nirvikalpa. Okay, I'm nothing now. See. Gaudapada says here, in this description of the soul heading for its true nature, it dreams itself away from it. You see, now it's got to dream itself back somehow. Gaudapada says, mind, and here's the father of non-origination, mind and entities are traditionally known as free of creation and destruction. Thus, those who know this do not fall into error. Sounds like the right perspective to me. Maha Mudra isn't letting you fall into error. When the dreaming mind vibrates, it gives rise to twos and the many. But when it is free of all cause and effect, it remains unoriginated. So how should I let this mind engage in sankalpa, vikalpa, and so forth? Very carefully. At the end of sankalpa and vikalpa, I must draw it back in and dissolve it back into the ocean. At the end of every day, everything I projected needs to be dissolved. I can't hold on to anything. This is the daily practice of non-duality. It's very simple. You saw everything was empty, so you made that conclusion. You heard your teachers say that you were perfect, so you made that conclusion. Now I have to follow through by, at the end of the day, taking everything I thought about and dissolving it back into emptiness. But then I'm fine the next morning. I'm fine in my dream state that night. I could even maybe see the seeds in deep sleep and get free. I could resolve all my processes in Brahman, because that was what Gaudapada himself told us last week in his chart on non-touch yoga. All processes need to be dissolved into Brahman. You just do that once at the end of your life, good luck with that. It's possible, but maybe it should be at the end of every day, because you draw your last breath every night, you know. You die at night when you go into deep sleep. You stop breathing. It's just your mind comes back out of that, all of a sudden, it's aqualung, you see. Da-da-da-da-da-da. You see. Then everything comes dancing back at you. Gaudapada. I salute Gaudapada, for he was an illumined soul. My teacher said that many times from the podium when I heard it. Salute Gaudapada, for he was an illumined soul. All right, in the final minutes we have here the incomplete theories about the soul and creation. These are not the Maha Mudra view. These are not Adjaitivada view. They are that it happens by the will of the Lord. The Lord doesn't have any will, nor does the Lord have any desire. The Lord is uptakama, free of all desire. So it did not create this world. It did not create your suffering. It will not lift you out of this suffering. Your mind did all that. Give up the mind, purify it, and be one with Brahman again. Don't blame God for this mess. Another immature conclusion. This world, the soul and creation, is the work of time and space. Well, there's back to physics and evolutionary theory, you see. I have to go to the zoo to see my ancestors. But, you know, so it goes all the way back, and even in 5 million years, which is all my kind, if I were two-legged, lived out of those billions of years of evolution. Even if we're only slimmed down to that, then I'm finding that time and space did not reveal my true nature. It's impossible for time and space to reveal my true nature. Why? Because it's non-originated. Origination means time and space have to be in operation. Non-origination means that doesn't have to happen. Thousands and thousands of years go by, say 2,000 before I can see him again. That's way too long to wait to discover your true nature as being unoriginated. I do not care for a post-mortem emancipation. I heard my teacher say that from the podium. I'm not getting free after I die. See, I'm free right now, thank you very much, that's the way I'll take it, I'll assume that position, I'll realize it through the Maha Mudra or through Advaita Vedanta, that's the truth of the matter, let's snap to. Let's get it done. Let's get her done. Another immature opinion is that this creation came about for the sake of enjoyment. But God is aptakama, free of desire. Why would he project a world of enjoyment when pain always follows enjoyment? When suffering always follows happiness? You haven't made that most basic of connections yet, then you're up a creek without a paddle, maybe even without a boat. The only creek you want to be up with without a canoe is that island you went to where you burned it. See? Boat, paddle, and all. But the creek you ended up with without a paddle and without a boat, with this idea that all this world is for the sake of enjoyment, when if I look at the nature of objects, I get bored with them very quickly. I get bored with life very quickly. I get world weary. What about all that? In this tradition, that is in this culture, you'll get a pill for that. See? Here, we'll make you feel better. And another incomplete, although more complete than most, is that this universe was created for sportive play. There are some souls that will say, yes, I accept that. Other illumined souls will say, why would the Lord want to sport? Gaudapada is one of those. Why would the Lord want to sport? So, the jury is out. The jury is still deliberating on Leela. The Maha Leela of the Lord is a very powerful thing. But, in the final minutes, the truth about the soul and creation is this. It is unborn. That's non-origination, ajati. It is free of sleep. It is free of names and forms. It is spontaneous, immediate, like the Maha Mudra says it is. It is omniscient. It is free of conceptualization, like yoga says it is. And it is intense concentration without end. Om Bhadram Karnebihi Sriniyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Stirai Rangayish Tushtuvamsas Tonavir Vishema Devahitam Yadayuho. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the Universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.